historic day when India takes her place as a free and independent dominion in the British Commonwealth of Nations, I send you all my greetings and heartfelt wishes.
We made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge. At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom.
तलवार की नोक पर या एटम बॉम्ब के डर से कोई हमारे देश को झुकाना चाहे, दबाना चाहे, ये देश हमारा दबने वाला नहीं।
अगर देश को उठना है, पुरुषार्थ करना होगा, हम सबको पुरुषार्थ करना होगा। मैं अपने आप को उसमें शामिल करता हूँ, अपने जो सहयोगी मिनिस्टर हैं बैठे उन सबको शामिल करता हूँ कि हमको अनवरत परिश्रम करना पड़ेगा, तब जाके ये देश उठेगा।
भारत कोई 5 साल, 10 साल, 100 साल जीने का देश नहीं है। हजारों साल जीवित रहा है और हजारों साल और इसको जीवित रहना है।
हिंदुस्तान को कोई नहीं मार सका है आज तक। दुनिया की कई देश की हस्तियां मिट गई, ये देश कभी नहीं मिटा।
विश्व ने देख लिया है कि हम अपने राष्ट्रीय हितों पर आंच नहीं आने देंगे, चाहे वो परमाणु अस्त्र क्षमता विकसित करने की बात हो, चाहे मिसाइल क्षमता विकसित करने की बात, या अपनी मातृभूमि से दुश्मनों को बाहर खदेड़ने की बात।
देश बनता है देश की जनता की दिलेरी और हिम्मत से और काम करने की शक्ति से।
और हम मिलकर के हम दुनिया में अपनी अहमियत खड़ी कर सकते हैं, हम दुनिया में एक ताकत बन के उभर सकते हैं। आवश्यकता है हम मिलजुल करके चलें, गरीबी से लड़ाई जीतने का सपना लेकर के चलें।
Ever since 1947, the address to the nation by subsequent prime ministers has become an integral part of the Indian Independence Day celebrations. These speeches from the ramparts of the Red Fort resonate with every Indian and carve a roadmap for the future of the country. On the midnight of August 14, 1947, Jawaharlal Nehru addressed the Constituent Assembly, delivering his famous Tryst with Destiny speech.
At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom.
75 years later, that newly freed country is a rising global power, translating Mahatma Gandhi's dream of Swaraj or self-governance into reality.
इस मंथन को स्ट्रक्चर देने के लिए
Just a few days ago, on August 9th, Prime Minister Narendra Modi chaired a United Nations Security Council open debate, becoming the first Indian PM to do so.
समृद्धि मैरीटाइम ट्रेड के सक्रिय फ्लो पर निर्भर है.
The forum was joined by several heads of state and ministers, including Russia's President Vladimir Putin and US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Two nations that dominated the world order 7 decades ago when India was a newborn nation. Today, the reality is different. India is claiming its rightful place on the world stage. The focus of the UN Open Debate was on enhancing maritime security. Interestingly, just 2 days before his forum, India's indigenous aircraft carrier Vikrant successfully accomplished its maiden sea voyage. India has now joined a niche group of countries that can indigenously design, build, and integrate a state-of-the-art aircraft carrier. This is the new India, an Aatmanirbhar Bharat. India became independent after a long struggle for its self-determination. The young nation was ready to make a fresh start. But the question was, how? Very few Indians had experience in making foreign policies. What would be the right move for a country that was ruled for more than 200 years by England? By 1947, most of the Britishers had resigned and moved out. It was reported that more than 150 officers were required for missions abroad. Though India's oldest political party, Congress, had established a small foreign department in 1925 to make overseas contacts and to publicize its freedom struggle, it was imperative for India to create its new identity post the Second World War and its independence. It was then that Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, took charge of the external affairs and became the first foreign minister of the country. He continued this post for 17 years till 1964.
When India was born as an independent nation in 1947, what strikes us is how many odds had to be overcome as a newly born nation. You had, of course, the very important endeavor to bring about an integration of the states. You know, we had more than 500 princely states, which had to be forged into a united nation. You had almost immediately after India became independent, you had the whole issue of Jammu and Kashmir, the invasion from Pakistan over a large part of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. We also had to, chart a path for India in a very challenging international geopolitical environment. Don't forget that very soon we were faced with a polarized, international situation. This was the birth of the Cold War. And I think the dilemma for countries like India was that having won its independence through a very, very difficult and bitter struggle, how do you retain that, independence? Where each side is in fact pressing you to become part of their alliance system. And any aspect of trying to kind of chart your own path was even seen as unrealistic.
In 1961, India became one of the founding members of the non-alignment movement, a forum of 120 developing world states that are not formally aligned with or against any major power bloc, namely United States and Soviet Union. It was created and founded during the collapse of the colonial system and the independence struggles of the peoples of Africa, Asia, Latin America, and other regions of the world at the height of the Cold War. Over a period of time, NAM not only acquired a political dimension, but also an economic one. In 1971, the world saw the military might of India. It won the war against Pakistan that resulted in the birth of Bangladesh. Pakistan lost half its country, its forces in the east, and had to publicly surrender to India. By now, the focus of India's foreign relations was on security and strengthening border defenses. India had signed a treaty with the Soviet Union, promising mutual assistance in the case of war. While Pakistan received active support from the United States during the conflict.
Ceasefire and withdrawal.
One must note that prior to the war, US President Richard Nixon's dislike towards the Prime Minister of India, Indira Gandhi, became quite evident. The relations between these two nations were strained. As a result, the Soviet Union became India's largest trading partner and its biggest arms supplier. But in 1989, the USSR collapsed, and the non-alignment movement had to struggle to find relevance.
The Soviet Union suddenly collapsed overnight. And so a strategic partnership that we had fashioned with the then Soviet Union since 1960 for a period of almost 30 years virtually overnight evaporated. So India had to adjust to a very different geopolitical environment while at the same time trying to make certain that it is able to keep its economy in some sense a good repair, after the situation that we face. And I think perhaps people do not appreciate that we were able to overcome those challenges relatively smoothly.
From the economic liberation of 1991 to conducting Pokhran nuclear tests in 1998, India had to re-strategize and reassess its foreign policies. In fact, the India-US nuclear deal was initiated in 2005, after nearly 30 years of US-imposed sanctions since India tested its first nuclear weapon. Soon after this, India's relationship with the US took a dynamic turn, moving towards a strategic partnership. The two largest democracies in the world were facing similar challenges.
I would say that, the nuclear deal would not have been possible unless there was a significant change in India-US relations. There were changes in perceptions on both sides. Now, as you are aware, from 1960 to 1990, one of the very important factors bringing India and the Soviet Union together was also the challenge posed by China. Both countries considered that China's expansion, its kind of aggressiveness affected the interests of both the Soviet Union as well as India. So there was a certain, natural kind of a fit between the two countries in terms of this very important aspect. But this was not the only aspect. There were many other elements, but this was an important element.
Today, India's policy continues to evolve, taking into consideration international, domestic, and individual circumstances. Its Neighborhood First policy focuses on peaceful relations with its South Asian neighbors.
OECD.
It is also one of the leading voices of Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, or Quad.
In fact, it doubled it from 3.2%.
On January 1st, 2021, India started its 2-year tenure as a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. This is the 8th time that the country has had a seat on the powerful table. This is just the beginning for India.
I think we have been very fortunate that despite the fact that the Indian Foreign Service is one of the smallest in the world compared to the kind of scale of engagement we have with the external world, has actually performed rather well. I mean, maybe I'm being somewhat parochial in making that statement, but that is true. But I would also say today that it will no longer be possible to maintain a very expansive external engagement. Today, you have India being very active on the international stage. You have a prime minister who's very active internationally. You have many more engagements with the rest of the world than you have ever had before. It is very important that the professional team which supports that engagement must be expanded, must be better trained. You need better human resources to be able to sustain that external engagement.
ऊपर से भारत कैसा दिखता है आपको?
जी मैं बगैर किसी झिझक के कह सकता हूँ कि सारे जहां से अच्छा.
These words touched the hearts of every Indian. On the 2nd of April 1984, former Indian Air Force pilot Rakesh Sharma described India from outer space. Wing Commander Rakesh Sharma became the first Indian citizen to go into space. He spent 7 days and 21 hours in space as a part of a joint program between the Indian Air Force and the Soviet Interkosmos space program. About 1.5 decades before this mission, the Indian Space Research Organization was formed in 1969. It is one of the largest space agencies in the world. In a quest to conquer space, ISRO has conducted many missions, including Gaganyaan, India's first venture into interplanetary space. It was launched on the 5th of November 2013. Other key missions by ISRO includes Chandrayaan and Chandrayaan 2. But one of the most important missions by ISRO is Mission Shakti. It was conducted on the 27th of March 2019 from the Dr. Abdul Kalam Island Launch Complex in the state of Odisha. With this mission, India joined an exclusive group of spacefaring nations, such as the United States, Russia, and China. India scripted history as it became one of the countries to demonstrate anti-satellite capabilities. And now India is set to foray into independent human space exploration. The crew will take to low Earth orbit for a week using homegrown technology. In fact, the formal announcement of the Gaganyaan program was made by Prime Minister Narendra Modi during his Independence Day address in 2018.
हमारे देश ने संकल्प किया है कि 2022 जब आजादी के 75 साल होंगे, मां भारत का कोई संतान, चाहे बेटा हो या बेटी, कोई भी हो सकता है, वे अंतरिक्ष में जाएंगे.
In 1947, India was left with a crippled economy and was battling abject poverty as a result of steady deindustrialization by Britain. Less than a sixth of Indians were literate. Till the 1990s, development projects were heavily scrutinized and carried out under government control, one of the reasons why progress remained slow.
Well, I think by general consensus, people do recognize that the 1991 period, when the reforms were ushered in, I think at that time, it really converted the economy, which was public sector-led growth model, where the public sector had the commanding heights and all the sectors, whether it was telecom or whether it was airlines or whether it was steel or whether it was cement or whatever, everything was reserved for the private sector, for the public sector, sorry. And the private sector also had a very limited space, and they were constraints on their capacities. The regulations for trade were very tight. So all that dismantling process, which I think started in 1991, it converted the growth model from a public sector-led growth model into somewhat of a private sector-led growth model.
The Indian financial sector underwent a paradigm shift in July 1969, when the Indira Gandhi government nationalized the 14 biggest commercial lenders.
In one stroke, all the banks were made into a government department, and the regulatory system was almost non-existent. There was no system for income recognition or asset classification or capital adequacy for banks. And so they were being run as government departments, so which bred a lot of inefficiency into the system. Because ultimately, the economy also depends on the efficiency of the financial sector, because financial sector is the intermediary sector. It takes savings from savers of society and then gives them to the users of those savings. There were certainly certain benefits. People do claim that bank nationalization led to spread of banking in rural areas into the hinterland of the country. There were more priority sector lending to the weaker sections of the economy and all that. But certainly all that could have been achieved by regulatory fiats by the Reserve Bank of India, instead of government taking over the banks and making them into a government department, which was, I think in hindsight also, it was quite a bad move.
After struggling for the first 50 years, in 1991, India liberated the country's economic policies with the goal of making the economy more market and service-oriented and expanding the role of private and foreign investment. The pace of development changed after the private players came in.
We have come a long way since 91, and private sector is becoming more and more vibrant, and we are seeing that the public sector role in many areas, other than a few left now, defense and petroleum and all that, in most other sectors, I think private sector has become a very dominant and a vibrant player, and which has brought in a lot of efficiencies into the system.
India's infrastructure services also started moving away from the realm of government control to that of the private sector. It is a key driver for the Indian economy, responsible for accelerating India's overall development. The sector covers a wide range of subgroups, such as power, ports, railways, telecommunications, and roads, amongst others. Today, India's road network is the second largest in the world, after the United States. One of the most ambitious road projects is the Atal Tunnel, named after former Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee. At a length of 9.02 kilometers, it is the longest tunnel above 10,000 feet. The strategically important tunnel connects Manali to Lahore-Spiti Valley throughout the year. Earlier, the valley was cut off for about 6 months every year due to heavy snowfall. In 2019, Prime Minister Narendra Modi envisioned making India a $5 trillion economy and a global economic powerhouse by 2024 to 25. As per the Indian Infrastructure Sector in India Industry Report, India plans to spend $1.4 trillion on infrastructure between 2019 and 2023, which is predicted to boost the expansive growth of the sector. This, in turn, will have a multiplier effect on several other sectors. Not many would know that India had 25% of world industrial output in 1750, and this dwindled to 2% in 1900. India had been deindustrializing since the early part of the century. One of Narendra Modi's first promises when elected India's Prime Minister in 2014 was to revive the country's manufacturing sector.
कम मेक इन इंडिया, आइए हिंदुस्तान में निर्माण कीजिए। इलेक्ट्रिकल से लेकर के इलेक्ट्रॉनिक तक कम मेक इन इंडिया।
Only mass manufacturing can create enough jobs for India's massive workforce. In recent years, India's business climate has been improving, and it is taking big strides in positioning itself as a global manufacturing hub of choice, be it the electronics industry or the textile sector. India's manufacturing sector has immense potential as an engine for economic growth and jobs. With a population of over 1.3 billion people, India has the world's largest youth population. This large workforce is its biggest asset, and the country has an extraordinary opportunity to leapfrog to a brighter future.